Hello and welcome to another episode of Indian Global Left. If you are new to the program, please consider subscribing. Also consider becoming a YouTube member, a Patreon, or donate a small amount given in the link in the description box. Without further ado, let me welcome our guest tonight, Ambassador Chas Freeman. Ambassador Freeman is an American retired diplomat and writer. Ambassador Freeman, welcome back to India and Global Left.
Thank you, Jodish. It's good to be with you.
Our last interview with you did provide a helpful framework for many of our viewers to understand the larger picture of the war. It was particularly the day when the Iranian President um, Pezeshkian apologized, quote unquote, for to the Gulf states for having created inconvenience of war. If you could take it from there and update our viewers on what has happened since then, and what is the larger picture that you can see with regards to the war?
Well, I think what is happening is a lot of strategic movement on all sides. It's become very apparent that the objectives of Israel, which is the progenitor of this war, and the United States are quite different. Israel seeks the collapse of the Iranian state, the annihilation of Iranian power, uh, possibly the breakup of of Iran into stateless, but at least the decimation, or I should say, the annihilation of the Iranian society. The United States began with a very confused set of excuses for basically following Israel into this war. Many different objectives, none of them obviously feasible. Um, One of those objectives was regime change. Regime change is much less than a state collapse as an objective. So what we're seeing now is these differences playing out. As I said the last time, I believe Israel has a strategy which involves annihilating the Iranian state and disempowering the Gulf Arabs. I mean, Israel's quite happy to see the Gulf Arab energy production capabilities reduced and thereby their wealth and global influence. It also is conducting false flag operations on their territory to induce them to join it in opposing Iran. And their attitude is very difficult, and I'll come back to that. But on the Iranian side, the strategy has been equally clear, and it is to cease accepting provocations and limited attacks from Israel and more recently the United States, and to respond all out to an existential challenge to it that is posed by Israel by mounting an existential challenge to Israel. And I think the objectives of the Iranians have been quite clear, some of them long-standing, ironically now being achieved in this war. For example, sanctions relief. The United States, out of a desire to keep prices at the gas pump, petrol pump, low, has lifted the sanctions on Iranian oil. Ergo, sanctions relief for Iran. So Iran wins on that front. Iran's objective of battering Israel into at least deterring a deterrent posture, if not destroying Israel, is proceeding. We've now seen a pattern emerge of tit for tat strikes and counterstrikes. So if Israel or the United States, and by the way, this is a combined air campaign. So when the United States says, well, or Israel says we didn't coordinate with the United States, or the United States says we didn't coordinate with Israel, this is false, because you can't conduct an air campaign like this without intimate coordination. So the attack on Natanz, the Iranian nuclear enrichment center, which Israel says it did not do, meaning the United States did it, does not absolve Israel at all of complicity or responsibility for this attack. First, in the indirect sense, because the purpose of the war has been set by Israel, not by the United States. And the United States is basically aiding and abetting an Israeli assault on Iran. But also because this attack had to have been coordinated, and it serves the Israeli interest of destroying the Iranian nuclear capability. This has been answered with an attack now on Dimona, the Israeli nuclear facility. Similarly, an attack by Israel on the gas fields in Qatar has been met with attacks by Iran Israel attacked the Iranian gas fields. That has been
South
met by an
Pars.
Iranian attack on Qatar and on the UAE and elsewhere. So we're seeing a constant escalation, with each step in escalation being taken by the attacking Israeli and American side. There, I want to just say one other thing here, and that is, if one of the objectives of the United States was regime change, that has not only failed, but proven greatly counterproductive. The murder of Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, has had several consequences. First, he was the principal opponent of Iran building nuclear weapons. He was also the opponent of a rising chorus among the Iranian establishment that argued that Iran should build an ICBM capable of striking the United States and should not continue the range limitations that he personally imposed on the Iranian military establishment. So he had imposed a limit of 2,000 to 2,500 kilometers as a limit. That policy has now been openly broken with an unsuccessful effort to strike Diego Garcia at approximately 4,000 kilometers distance from Iran. So the war is expanding geographically, and the implication is that down the way, Iran will join North Korea in building both a nuclear deterrent force and the missiles capable of delivering nuclear weapons to American territory. So there are all sorts of knock-on implications of this. But not only this, but the hardliners, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard in Iran, now are apparently in the ascendancy. Here, I must say that Israel appears to be following a deliberate pattern of murdering any moderate who might be a useful interlocutor for a negotiation with the United States. They don't want a negotiation. They fear Trump's volatility. They don't want him to get into a negotiation with Iran. He vacillates from moment to moment, one moment declaring victory, the next moment demanding support from allies, which they have universally denied to him. And one moment speaking of ending the war, another speaking of escalating it. He's just threatened to take out Iranian power plants. The only result of that we know from previous experience will be that Iran will take out the power plants of its neighbors, including Israel and the Gulf Arabs. A final point here, and that is that the United States, in addition probably to having struck Natanz and thereby kicked off attacks on Dimona, made a mistake early on in attacking a desalination plant on the island off Bandar Abbas, and depriving some 30 villages of their water. This so far has not been reciprocated by Iran, but it is a reminder that Iran has the capability literally to destroy the Gulf Arab societies, which cannot exist without desalinated water. So what we're seeing is a pattern of escalation. And all of this, I will conclude, in the context of effective Iranian pressure through Iran's administration of the Gulf of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has not closed the Strait of Hormuz. It has not sown mines in the strait, as far as we know. It has, however, effectively set up a toll booth and required anyone who goes through the canal, the strait, to pay it for the privilege. And in doing so, it has produced a very interesting situation in which the United States continues to bluster and apply only military force, no diplomacy. But other countries, China, India, Turkey, and behind the scenes, France and Italy, have been negotiating with Iran and achieved free pass. Now Japan has apparently joined them in achieving free passage for their ships for a fee through the Strait of Hormuz. I suspect this is a long-term Iranian effort to dominate that portion, the key portion of the global oil and gas trade by having the ability to either turn the stopcock or not. The Strait of Hormuz is now a toll highway, not a freeway. Very interesting. Donald Trump's answer to this has been, well, we don't use it anyway, which is not true, since we have the Fifth Fleet headquarters at Bahrain, for example. Those countries that do use it for purposes of energy supply chains should now take responsibility for opening it, now that we've enabled it to be closed to us. It's not closed to them. If they rely on diplomacy, they now conceive that Iran will respond by allowing them to get their ships through. Finally, Iran's own oil exports seem to have gone up. That is, Iran is producing more oil and shipping it in its own vessels or chartered vessels through the strait without interference from the American Navy, which is standing off at some distance, but which has basically been told not to destroy, further destroy the world's access to energy and thereby bid up prices, even in the United States, because basically prices of oil as opposed to gas are determined entirely by the global supply, not by the supply in any one country. Let me stop here. That was quite long. I'm sorry about that, but I hope informative.
Absolutely. I was really struck by your argument about the irony that the war has actually limited or decreased the negative aspects of sanctions and isolations that was there before the war, and how Iran has been most likely shipping more energy. Um, if you could tell us a little bit about the situation in which the Arab states, the Gulf states in particular, have found themselves, given they have long exchanged their autonomy for the security by becoming a vassalage of the United States. On the other hand, more recently, they have seen the liabilities have become very high. On one hand, the US is going down in terms of its influence, and on the other hand, Israel is expanding so much that it has been threatening the Gulf Arab states as well, and so ideological opposition to Iran might even become less significant than the threat that Israel itself is imposing on them. So I wonder what your reading is about their situation.
Well, the war has changed the situation radically for the Gulf Arabs. They had been, as you suggest, moving slowly, not very visibly, but palpably toward some kind of coalition with Iran to counterbalance Israeli dominance of Levant and Israeli aggression against its neighbors. That is paused, if not over. That is to say, they now are furious with Iran for what Iran is doing to them. They are belatedly and grudgingly understanding that the presence of American bases on their territory is not a defense, but an invitation for others to attack them. They are aware of the Israeli false flag operations I referred to, which are intended to bring them into the war on the side of Israel and the United States. However, their own people have been so horrified, justly so, by the genocide in Gaza and by Israeli behavior generally, that it's politically impossible for them to strike back at Iran, with the appearance that they were siding with Israel and the United States. Those who are attentive to the situation in the Gulf states are also aware that Israel is attempting to annex about a third of Lebanon, south of the Litani River, first clearing it as a free fire zone, much in the manner of Gaza, and then later settling it, which is classic Israeli expansionism. And it once again illustrates the divide between Israeli objectives and American objectives. The American ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, is an infamous Zionist who endorses the project of Greater Israel, but very few in the United States do, other than some Christian, right-wing Christian Zionist elements who are similar to him in their views. Israel is attempting through this war to realize its project of Greater Israel, which would extend Jewish control from the Euphrates to the Nile, including parts of of Iraq, of Syria, of Lebanon, of Jordan, of Saudi Arabia, of Egypt. This is a formula that guarantees eternal hostility to Israel by all these countries. And that is now part of the problem. To be associated with the United States is to be associated with Israel. And this is not acceptable now. Of course, the Gulf Emirates, monarchies, if you will, monarchy is really not the right word because that refers to Aristotelian taxonomy. These are societies that are ruled by a process of consultation by family leaders with the broad society, sometimes rather nastily called bedocracy, meaning ruled by Bedouin. These societies depend for their cohesion on strong leadership at the top, backstopped by formidable domestic surveillance and intelligence and police establishments, many of them ironically now established on the basis of Israeli technology. That has been one of Israel's great points of attraction, that it has perfected police state technology by experiments in Gaza and in the West Bank, as well as within Israel proper. But these societies now face a revenue shortfall. And the combination of police state management and essentially bribery of the public through welfare payments is going to become quite difficult for them. Some of the major plans that have been on the table, like the Project 2030 in Saudi Arabia, the idea of an effective, smooth transition away from a economy based on hydrocarbon sales to one based on knowledge, a knowledge-based economy, all of this has been gravely damaged as a prospect. And in the long run, the Gulf Arabs, who had sold themselves as islands of stability in a world of turmoil, a place where you could place data centers, where you could do various useful things, where expats could go and live in luxury, where people from your part of the world, in South Asia, could work in security. People from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka make up the bulk of the labor force in these societies. All this is now in jeopardy, and so the uncertainties in Kuwait, in Riyadh, in Bahrain, in Manama, in Doha, in Abu Dhabi now must be very great, even in Oman, which of course has been the exception to the others in terms of maintaining an ostentatious neutrality vis-a-vis Iran. So they're in a very difficult position, and they have to make a choice. And I believe that there have been diplomatic discussions between them and Iran. I know that Saudi Arabia has just expelled some Iranian diplomats, well, military attaches and diplomats. I assume that the embassy remains open because the greatest utility of diplomacy is exactly in times of war, something that the West routinely forgets, but which the Chinese have demonstrated on numerous occasions, including in the 1962 border war with India, where they kept their embassy in Delhi open because that was essential to find an end to the war. Same thing with Vietnam in 1979. The Chinese embassy in Hanoi remained open even as fierce battles occurred, Chinese forces advancing on Hanoi. So I think there are discussions going on, and the Iranians have made it very clear that the price for respite from and relief from attacks is dissociation with the United States. No more American bases. I should say that the utility of those bases was greatly compromised right at the outset of the war when the radar sets that were essential to both air traffic control, the choreography of the air attacks on Iran, and also the guidance for missile interception by THAAD, the Theater High Altitude Air Defense, or Patriot point defense. These, or for that matter, the Israeli equivalents, which are the Arrow and David Sling, backed at lower altitudes against essentially unguided, very slow rockets by the so-called Iron Dome. All these have been rendered problematic right at the outset. I think the interception capability by Israel and the United States has now been greatly attrited. That is how the missile got through to Dimona. It did not hit the nuclear installation, but it came close. And one doesn't know whether Iran was firing deliberately missing the research station or not, because the next step in the escalation would be an Israeli nuclear attack on Iran, or not. Maybe Iran has the accuracy necessary to hit the nuclear station at Dimona, in which case there will be a cloud of radioactivity that extends over much of Israel and even gets into Egypt. Nothing to be welcomed by anybody. But at any rate, there's an escalation process going on, and there's no way to stop it. And here we have a final observation is that this war, as I said the last time we met, is not something that Israel and the United States can stop. Only Iran can stop it. Iran now controls the Strait of Hormuz, directly from shore-based batteries, not which the United States has recently bombed with heavy bombs, but which it has not eliminated. And it it retains a supply of missiles. In fact, it's apparently manufacturing more deep underground as we speak to enable it to carry on this war for years, not months. So Israel has finally met an opponent which will do to it what it does to others. What Iran has not yet done, but must be sorely tempted to do, is assassination. Of this is a major element in the Israeli campaign. It has been used by the United States, for example, in the first Trump administration against General Soleimani. And Iran so far has held back. Whether it's done so out of religious scruples or why, what its calculation is, I don't know. But I fear that it will not hold out forever under these assaults. I mean, we have open statements from Israeli officials like Minister of Defense Katz, Israel Katz, saying that any Iranian official at all is fair game for assassination. One wonders why that wouldn't apply to Israel under the formula of Rabbi Hillel, a famous figure in Jewish thought that seems to have been forgotten in Israel. He said, "Do not do to other people what you do not want them to do to you." And Israel is violating that with an apparent sense of impunity.
I'll come back to some of the questions I have on Israel, on Iran, and Iran. But if I could ask one follow-up on the Arab states, as you spoke about many of the dilemmas that the Gulf Arab states are facing. Um, it seems to me that you're talking about two set of broad problems or dilemmas. One set of dilemmas are more long-term and economic and on development, which is kind of alternative to finding hydrocarbons. Some of them because of larger global transition to green energy, but others are because of internal problems of running out of oil and gas reserves. We've seen that on many of the Emirates, which ran out of oil, and so they had to find alternatives in tourism, in real estate, in finance, in American corporations, etc., etc. And some of those problems, it seems to me that they had seen even before Operation Alaska Flood, or what is more better known as October 7. But my question to you is, did they see the security aspect as a dilemma more recently? Because even the last decade and a half, if we are thinking about post-occupation of Iraq and how states broke down in Iraq and Syria and the problems generated by that rise of non-state actors, the ISIS, Al Qaeda, Al Nusra, etc. It seemed to them that the exchange of autonomy for security in the United States worked very well for them, because in around surrounding them, societies broke down because of the breakdown of the states while they were protected. But now they seem to be in a very precarious situation given Iran is attacking them. So I wonder if you think they had foreseen the security thing as a dilemma before, or is it very sudden realization?
No, I don't think they did see it. I think it is a sudden revelation to them, a very unwelcome one. Um, I note that there are two things. First, they were aware of the vulnerabilities that overdependence on the United States created, and they therefore had been very carefully diversifying their international military relationships, both in terms of arms procurement and in terms of interchange with others. So they had reached out to China, to India, to Russia, to others, to some individual European countries, in order to diversify their their base of military support. Anyway, they have a dilemma there too. There's been a recent $6.5 billion arms sales proposal for them from the United States. They remain wedded to American systems. I think they're now going to have to look, as I've indicated before, to double down on the partnership in the case of Saudi Arabia with Pakistan, and thereby with Chinese technology, which is the backbone of Pakistani military strength. And they're going to have to move to divorce themselves from many American systems. Whether the United States is sophisticated enough to hold on to some of those relationships as the overall dependence on the United States collapses will be an interesting question. You mentioned the transition to green energy, and here I want to say one of the major knock-on effects of this war has been to create a huge market for Chinese technology globally. Every country now, including your own, will want to double down on renewable energy, solar, wind, nuclear, and electric vehicles, in which China is the undisputed leader in the world, are now going to become very much the focus of many more countries. The United States, of course, is the exception. Donald Trump has a love affair with the oil companies and the internal combustion engine that will be hard to break. But I don't see how even neighboring Canada will be able to resist the temptation of independence from fossil fuel sources, which, even if Canada, for example, has ample fossil fuel within it, its price level is determined globally. I mean, there's basically a reservoir into which many streams of oil flow, from which many streams of oil flow out. And it's the level in the reservoir that determines the prices, not by which stream you happen to sit on. Russia is also, I should say, a major beneficiary of this war, not only in terms of relief from sanctions on its oil, which it has obtained for nothing, but also in terms of the imminent weakening of Ukraine, because the weapons that might have been supplied to Ukraine in the future, bought by the Europeans for transfer to Ukraine from the United States, are being shot off in West Asia. They're not available. And we know that the American military industrial base is very rickety and weak and not able to ramp up production on a surge basis. Finally, the United States, of course, in a military sense, has been greatly weakened, not only by the depletion of our munitions, but by the damage to our reputation. And here I want to say that one of the great mistakes of American popular military thought, maybe the product of video games and hubris combined, is to imagine that the success of war can be measured in terms of the damage inflicted on the enemy. How many buildings you blew up, how many ships you sank, how many this, that. But in fact, we're seeing a repeat of a lesson we should have learned from Vietnam, which is you can bomb the bejesus out of the enemy, destroy all kinds of things. That does not destroy the enemy's will to fight, or even its capacity to fight. As I said the last time I was with you, the Iranian strategy emulates Muhammad Ali's rope-a-dope strategy. Let the enemy punch himself into exhaustion while you wait till he's weakened enough for you to deliver a knockout blow. That is exactly what seems to be playing out. So to sum up, I think Iran is not going to give up. It does not want a ceasefire. It does not want negotiations. It agrees with Israel on that. Israel and Iran both see this as an existential struggle, which must be continued to the end. The United States is not in tune with that. Donald Trump does not know how to get off the escalator he's just come down. And, he may invent Mexican rapists or something. He seems to come up with a new idea every few minutes. But that's not going to suffice to end this. And the global impact of this is mounting, not just economically in terms of probable surge of inflation from higher energy prices, not just in terms of redirection of investment toward green energy sources, not just in terms of the empowerment of China and Russia, also, of course, drawing them closer together. The power of Siberia pipeline, gas pipeline, which has been under discussion for over a decade, now seems to be moving forward as a real project, drawing China and Russia into greater interdependence, something that strategically is not in the American interest. But finally, I think people should pay attention to the comments of the wimpish Europeans. Europeans have this wonderful habit of wringing their hands while sitting on them in response to crises. This time they're speaking out. We're hearing more and more people saying, let's get out of NATO, get to end the American bases on our territory. The Atlantic Alliance is broken. There's a big demonstration today, there was in Madrid in Spain, demanding that Spain expel American bases and leave NATO. And so American imperiousness has drawn a backlash, which is reflected not only in the refusal to send forces to the state of Hormuz, but in more fundamental strategic decoupling. And no, I think the long-term implications of this, horrifying as the short-term damage from the war is to the Iranians who are being badly pounded, to Israel, which is being battered, to the Gulf Arabs, which are being chastised and punished. As horrifying as all that is, it's the long-term implications, the strategic implications that should concern us most. The United States is destroying itself as a global power.
Yeah, I think it may not be an exaggeration to say, again, focusing on the long term, as you said, because newspaper tends to focus on the short term and it looks very different. I think it was the Annals School historian Brodel who said that historians who can't focus on long-term trends are like journalists focusing on events because they were focusing on the long durée. And as I listened to you, I thought it might not be an exaggeration to say that this war, I don't want to romanticize, but the moment we are going through may be really revolutionary. First, as you said, it's propelling Iran to a guardianship of the Persian Gulf and the neighboring Indian Ocean, maybe probably the first time since the breakdown of the Safavid Empire in 1736, because since then the Iranian history has gone through a very tumultuous phase. Secondly, I think about the transition aspect regarding green energy is really profound, because given the last phase of industrial revolution was really the search for cheap usable energy, and now we are trying to move towards not just cheap but clean energy. And there has been a lot of reluctance, particularly on the global south, for legitimate reasons, because there is the trade-off between development and saving the planet and saving the people. And this search for cheaper, effective Chinese green energy might be very revolutionary, as you said. And one last comment would be the financial aspect, given the last 50 years or so, since 1970s, as the neoliberal turn financialized the global economy, but particularly since the 90s, the petrodollar system, because as you
Yeah,
said, if there is a rethinking about buying American weapons, then it will really destabilize the dollar system, because a lot of recycling of this reserve is by through the euro bond, the bond dollar market. Basically, the transatlantic system, it depends on the how much money the Gulf Arab states sends to the transatlantic financial system. So what you are saying basically is these are really, really profound moments we are going through in a larger historical template.
I agree with all that. Let me add another factor, and that is if Europe decouples from the United States, where does it go? Does it form a partnership with India, with China? What does it come to grips with the reality of Russian power in its own sphere or not? Finally, since we're running out of time, I'll just say that our amazingly stupid Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, when he tried to justify lifting the embargo on Iranian oil sales, said, well, we still control this because they have to use dollars. That is an invitation to start trading in yuan or rupees or some other currency, euros perhaps. Anyway, but basically something that is totally disassociated from SWIFT, the dollar transaction center in Belgium, which is the basis for American control of global trade and investment. So it's not just the end of the United States or the eclipse of the United States, at least for a time, in terms of military power projection capabilities. And by the way, you can't get between Europe and Asia except across this war zone. So it's basically we're seeing a huge diversion of civilian air traffic through places like Azerbaijan, because Russia is off limits to the Western airlines due to Western policy. Chinese airlines make a killing going across Russia in times and shorter distances that are denied to their European and American competitors. So I think what we're seeing is indeed what the former German Chancellor Scholz called a Zeitenwende, meaning a hinge moment in global history. And finally, I'll just say I much appreciate your comment on history and historians and the myopia of the press and its focus on very short-term events, sort of always down in the weeds, very seldom rising above the ground far enough to see the overall terrain and how it's moving, how it's changing. I think we all should learn from this, that before you start a war, you should consult a historian. Um, and I don't know if your specialty is history, but perhaps if it is, you'll be in more demand in future.
Well, some of the historians were horrible before the U.S. occupation of Iraq. I mean, things that predicted were entirely wrong and misleading. So I'm not sure, but there are good historians and bad historians, and let's bracket
There
them.
are there are historians who are worth reading, and for my own country, sadly, the United States, it's important to read the history of the Roman Republic and its downfall. It's also important to read the Chinese histories of the dynastic cycle, which suggests that constitutional orders have limited lifespans, and that whatever the situation is at present may not extend into the future. Nothing is forever. A useful thing to bear in mind when you start wars that end in Pyrrhic victories.
We'll leave it there. I had so many more questions on Iraq in particular, on the military balance of power. In fact, one of the viewers of our last program with you was Professor Norman Finkelstein, and he said that this was very helpful for him. He particularly appreciated the analytical framework that you provided. But one of the questions he had was about the military balance of power. And he said that I heard many things on Gaza. Um, I mean, he clubbed you with many others. I'm not sure fairly or unfairly, but he was talking about the narrative that Hamas was an effective military resistance, and in his opinion, that was a wrong narrative.
Yeah.
But yeah, he said that he's cautious about the strength of the Iranian side. I wanted to ask you about this, but we're running out of time. If you could give us a brief comment on that, and then we can close.
Well, I'll just say Norman Finkelstein is both brilliant and fearless. I actually agree with him. Hamas is an indomitable expression of Palestinian nationalism. Before it had any military capability, it had a political existence and aspiration. It has not been beaten and defeated militarily in the sense that it still exists. But the military aspect of it was always secondary. So I actually agree with Dr. Finkelstein on this point. As far as the military balance is concerned, there's other things going on which we might talk on about in another session, and that they include the development of science and technology outside the Atlantic region. The Australian Strategic Policy Institute, which I'm sure you're aware of, tracks now 74 areas of science and technology and finds China to be in the lead in 68. I don't know who have the other six at this point. But we are seeing in effect, we're seeing a kind of return to a pattern that existed before the rise of the West 500 years ago. And that is that great civilizational societies, India was not a state, China was, but India was many states within a civilizational context, that these two societies were globally dominant in terms of wealth, power, and science and technology. And I mean, it's no accident that so-called Arabic numerals are actually Indic numerals, originated in India, and it's also it should not surprise us that Persia is a great civilizational society on its own, which at various points has incorporated parts of India. So we're dealing with a return to patterns that were the norm 500 years ago. And this is kind of important. If you're, of course, the magnificent civilizations of the Western Hemisphere were wiped out by European introduced disease and conquest. But I think maybe they're coming back too in their own way. So we're seeing a shift in the pattern of global distribution of wealth and power that is really quite remarkable. And I'm going to talk about this, I hope, a little bit. I've somehow gotten involved in an annual lecture at the University of Cambridge in UK to a group of Chinese bureaucrats, corporate bureaucrats, state-owned enterprise officials who are about to take the leap into the highest echelons of leadership. And I've been thinking about the implications of what is called the Colombian, anyway, the intercourse between the Western Hemisphere and the rest, and which changed the world fundamentally. I mean, you could not imagine the cuisine of Andhra Pradesh without chiles, but they came from Central America. What about the potato? I think North Indians like that, and and peanuts. which are also from Brazil originally, and chocolate, if you have that affliction, from Central America. The tomato from Mexico, corn from Mexico and the Mississippi Valley, squashes, zucchini, for example. All of these are from a civilization now vanished in the Mississippi Valley. And of course, in the Americas, there were no sheep, goats, pigs, horses, cows, and very limited animal protein. Anyway, that moment, 1492, now a little over 5 centuries ago, fundamentally changed the world by, for the first time, creating a single world in which the distribution of power was, on a global level, was significant. We're still in that world, but the distribution of power within it is shifting radically. And I think it's largely returning to the pre-Columbian pattern. I won't be allowed to see whether I'm right or not. You may be.
This reminds me of Lenin. I think it was in 1916. He was talking to some young Russians in Switzerland, if I'm not wrong, but please correct me if I'm wrong, viewers. He said that uh, the revolution in Russia would happen. Maybe I'm not too young to see that, but this will happen. And months later, in February, in Russia, revolution broke out in the middle of the war. So. You never know. And yeah, I mean, you've spoken about the significance of energy and U.S. hegemony, which is again the other word has been colonialism in the longer sort of historical framework. And one of the theses on this sort of great divergence literature between the Western Hemisphere and Asia, let's say. One thesis says that the discovery of cheap, accessible coal in Britain and the discovery of colonies were central to this kind of great divergence. So all of these things came together in our discussion.
You've inadvertently reminded me of an Indian American, meaning South Asian American, I think Muslim comedian, who, when he was asked, why Columbus discovered America, he said he was looking for us.
We'll leave it there, Ambassador Freeman. This was a fascinating conversation. I was not particularly looking for long-term implication of the moment you were going through because in the preparation to this interview, I was reading more and more news, so I was thinking about the short-term things. But it was a great pleasure that you spoke about the long-term things, and thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your answers.
My pleasure, Jyotish. Keep
Take
well.
care.
Hi, my name is Ayushman. I, along with Jyotisman, have started this platform. In the last 2 years, we have tried to build content for the left and progressive forces. We have interviewed economists, historians, political commentators, and activists so far. If you have liked our content so far and want us to build an archive for the left, I have two requests for you. Please do consider donating for the cause. Link is in the description below. Also, if you are not able to do so, don't feel sad. You can always like our videos and share our videos to your comrades. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.